Hey everyone, welcome to your daily update for SOL and BTC. A lot of big closes today. So today we've got all the weeklies and all the really big multi-weeklies. So if anything really big is going to move structurally, this is going to be the day that it changes. Also fitting that in a couple of days we have really big news events. So um, we've got FOMC coming up, interest rate, which everyone is speculating is going to be coming down. But then you've got all the other people saying, "Oh, why would they drop it if markets are at their highest?" and all that kind of stuff. So there's a bit of uncertainty around that, really. And then you've got things like job claims, etc., coming after that, and also Bank of Japan policy rate cuts. So between now and the 20th, you've pretty much got a lot of reason for market makers and major players to close out positions and de-risk. So people don't want to get caught on the wrong side of uncertainty. So it's typically you would start to see some kind of removal of liquidity from markets and a de-risking, and that can lead to bigger spread. So, which means smaller buys and sells can make larger volatile moves or changes in price. So be ready for that. It's the kind of thing that we should start to see this week. With liquidity over the weekend, there has been sort of a wee bit of movement just up and down over the weekend. It hasn't been dead flat, but it's just kind of bouncing around between trends and breaks, and as such, it's just kind of returning to the same place it started at. So we've definitely got that one-day liquidity built up to 253, and on SOL, and that's there to be taken. We just need to run into some kind of one-day support and then bounce up to that hold level and take that liquidity. To the downside, then you've got sort of 234, 232 on the short-term stuff, which could be taken. 237, 238. It's all pretty close in price based on the weekend. BTC sort of down to around that 114 and then back up to that 117. So it's all just playing in that same area. If we have a look at the 7-day liquidity, so 7-day liquidity is clearly longs. Longs are open. Mostly that's because a lot of the shorts got taken in that last week. But so those longs down to 228 would be one massive obvious cluster that exists in that 7-day liquidity, and we've got those targets to 228. So and we're still within the range of those moves. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we saw a dip down to take all that. And of course, that would mean the equivalent of popping down to sort of like 110, 109. We do have some very odd structure at the moment on BTC that sort of ranges between 117 and 112, actually about 112,600. And it's just been in the middle, and this entire week it's just sat in the middle. It just it hasn't gone and triggered the short, and it hasn't gone and triggered the long, just floating through the middle. But at some point soon it's going to go one way, and then that will trigger the action in the other direction. So it's just yeah, it'll happen. And if it's going to happen, it might as well happen after the liquidity gets thinner and the books get thinner, and it doesn't cost as much money or to move the price around. So I think they're probably just waiting for those books to get a bit thinner. And 30-day liquidity, well, there's not really a lot of reason to go up on SOL, and rightfully so. Like we've finished our biggest moves that we had in play. They all sort of stopped at about 247, and so we've got that little daily push up to 253 that probably will happen as a bit of a sweep, but we don't get any new bigger structure forming until the close today. And after that, we have some moves where if we have a bit of a pullback, we can push forward to things like 286. But just as it stands right now, we've completed the really big stuff, the 101 days, the 102-day longs that have been in play since July. It's kind of all done. So it's probably more a case of needing to go back to go forward now. All right, so let's have a look at the little bit of mess they made over the weekend. So certainly in the short term liquidity, there is some big gaps now. on SOL, where they've got to let some more positions come into the market because they've taken out all this stuff down to sort of 240, and they've taken out everything up to sort of around that 248, 250 area. So really, it's a case of it needs time. There isn't any, like I say, major incentive for this to go up. So if anything, a pullback down will then bring liquidity in on the top side. And so I'd sort of be expecting SOL to probably come back down, find some daily level support. And as it does that, this liquidity will form to the upside here and fill the gap, and then it can push back up if it wants to take that bit up here around 249 to 253. BTC, though, on the other hand, it's got quite a bit sitting in close proximity to the upside, and things like the SOLBTC chart have flipped now. So we've had that we've run into that monthly resistance on SOLBTC. So if anything, I'd be expecting to see a little bit more strength in the favor of BTC price. So it wouldn't surprise me if that pushes up first, hits the resistance that we have sitting in these higher areas, and then does that pullback. Because like I said before, everything that BTC's been doing lately has just kind of been through the middle. It hasn't really hit the major resistance, and it hasn't hit the major support. It's just been going sideways, and while that's been going sideways, SOL's kind of been doing its thing. But now that SOL has pretty much done its thing on the bigger time scales, yeah, it's probably time for BTC to start to take the reins again. So what are these charts showing us? Okay, so yep, so SOL BTC on the 1 day has hit the exterior trend, and it's rejected off that. So it's still closing in a good spot. So it's still continuously hard closing these lower levels, but it's definitely showing signs of rejection. If it was to come all the way back to trend, then really that is going to mean coming down to this 19541 level, and it could still retest these 189 levels and so on. There's a lot of reason for this to pull back, more so when we start to look at some of the other time frames. So the weekly, where it stands right now, the weekly is having a bit of a fight because it's going to want to try and pull back and get under this trend in the next 2 hours, because it is rejecting off that daily. But the thing is, if it actually doesn't get under that trend, then we could see one more push off that, and it could be quite a big push. So based on that, I would be expecting to see this come back down and keep pulling back down. But yeah, anything can kind of happen. So when this weekly rejected kind of in the middle of nowhere, that's because it's rejecting on the daily. It's pulling back, but yeah, if it does find topside support on this weekly range trend that's coming through here, then yeah, we could have a pretty explosive move suddenly on SOL. It would just almost come out of nowhere, if you know what I mean. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that the price will go up. What it might mean is that if BTC pushes up and SOL pushes up, then BTC hits its resistance and starts coming down. It could just mean that SOL doesn't dump as far or as hard as what BTC does. So, because any of these charts are about the relative difference. So, the monthly, as you can see, we hit that monthly trend. We're up inside the monthly hold. That's just a zoomed in view of it. So we've sort of just been bouncing off a little bit, and now we'd expect a rejection. So for this to actually reject to monthly support means coming all the way down to that 1800 or 1799 type area. The thing is, there's so many mixed messages here as to whether we'll have another push up first and then a down. I mean, the monthly really has nothing to stop it from rejecting down quite a way, versus the weekly, which the weekly sort of implies we could have another push up, whilst the daily is actually saying that we are currently rejecting. So if in the next couple hours the daily takes the weekly down low enough, then the weekly will start rejecting, and the monthly will just continue through its rejection and come down lower. We are basically waiting for a hard close on the monthly to basically hard close this 17770 level. And if we do that, which still 16 days away, then we have another reason for a retest and for a drop. So we could see the daily pushes down the weekly bounces support, the monthly has another little push up and then closes the monthly and then comes down. So it's kind of all possible for these things to play into each other's timeframes in different ways, but certainly they are looking like they are trying to pull back. This is the first time we're really seeing the strength disappear out of SOL. And as we said yesterday, here we go. So on the daily, the safety assets, I mentioned that it looked like we were having a sweep of this lower trend. So we did have that sweep of the lower trend. We went back up, we've bounced off the top of the trend, and we've come back up and we've hit the backside retest of the one above. So this is, if it went up a little bit, say from where it is now at 63.89, if it went up to say 64 by the end of the day, or a little bit under 64, it could open on the top side of that trend and then continue through to retest. And that's just going to mean dumpage in alts. Like they're just going to be, red and going down. And there's a lot of reasons to retest these upper ranges now, because this candle, which was not only a sweep of the lower range, it's also a hard close of the 64.3 range. So there's a lot of reason for this to come back up here to 64.3, and we've got a hold level there at 64.49, and then we've got untested levels up above. So given that we've broken through another range and hard closed it this time, we may not now go back up to 65. So what we might do is just come back up and retest something around the 64.3 level and then have a rejection off that for more downside. But it's definitely overdue for this to go up. Likewise overdue for SOL strength and price to go down. So everything's kind of lining up for that retrace that we wonder is ever going to happen. So totals, they shifted trend yesterday. They haven't retested the trend. So there's still the chance that it bounces off one of these levels, that it's still hovering above the horizontal levels, and it could go up to retest that trend. But it is also developing another hold level for resistance here at 367.91 today. So that could show further rejection, and we're getting finally some kind of trend support sort of happening in here. So so this could be that push down that we see. We could head up to the hold level at 367.91 and then reject back to the trend. It all depends on whether the trend holds, as to whether you then get continuation down to the downside. And so at this stage it's a maybe. And if we flip over and look at that from a different perspective, we're generating another hold level here at about 3.77. So the trend moved yesterday on the total. So this is totals for risk. So basically just excluding the two major stables. So the trend moved. We've rejected off the trend. We're coming down. We're creating a hold level. So this is the first step in a downtrend. But we do have a pretty decent size wick on the bottom of this candle. So there will be a support trend coming in as well, which is either, if that's from there, yeah, it is. So it's either from here, so it's like that. So in the next 2 hours, if they really want to send this thing down, then they're going to want to bring this total market cap down to about 3.74. Then they could open on the other side of the trend, even have a little bit of a rally to hit the hold level and then reject down. So we haven't retested this 3.71 level either, which was hard closed by this doji. And yeah, like I've said previously, dojis are not the best thing to trade off because there's such indecision. So if you're breaking a level or making a trend, you do it with confirmed accumulation or distribution, and dojis are kind of like indecisive accumulation or distribution. So it is still a bit of a tricky thing to say that that is a hard close of this level. So this 3.7 where are you? Yeah, 3.76 level that's running through here. You would assume that this doji is accumulation because that's how it closed, and so therefore you'd assume this level is hard closed. But given the indecisive nature of it and the fact that the price has now moved down below it, one could argue that maybe we haven't hard closed that level and we're going to reject off the backside of that even and just continue down. So it's yeah, we've got a hold level down here at 3.58. That would be sort of like the worst case scenario for where that topside trend is trying to reject the price to. So I've just got an alert set just above that. It also sort of lines up roughly with where the next level of trend support is. So certainly I would expect an entire market bounce if we were to hit that area. Okay, and then the weekly, and this is where it gets really fun. The weekly is actually, it's hit a break level at 3.78. It's rejecting from it, but it hasn't got below the trend yet, so it's sitting just above that resistance trend. So if it comes down to 3.74 or less by the end of the candle, which 1 hour and 59 minutes, then you could reject off the underside of that trend again and continue down. However, if it stays up here, it could just give a bounce straight off the top of that, and it could retest the break for another attempt to break the break, or it could look for some kind of really old trend. So we are at a pretty critical point on the total market cap where, as you can see, for this trend that's running through here, we've had 1, 2, 3, 1 sweep, so 4, 5 attempts to close above it. This is the first one where we actually might close above it today. And yeah, if we do, then you would expect us to go back up and retest something back up, quite a bit higher really. So around that 4 trillion area, and that's 4 trillion just for risk assets. So excluding BTC, sorry, excluding stables. So that's kind of giving us a bit of a hope that we're going to have some kind of major pump. But it is also entirely possible that we dive back down under the trend, sweep under the trend, and then go up. But so really, it's more of a long-term future perspective than an immediate term. So BTC. Well, BTC is just kind of sitting on the fence. It really couldn't open in a more tricky spot than this. To be fair, if it just drops back a little before the end of the day, so let's say we close at about 115,800, then you'd be pretty clearly under both trends. If it was to then do the opposite, so let's say if it closes over this level here at 115,987, then it's actually creating a hold level to try to push up and break through the trend. So it's really close. Yeah, this thing is really, really, really close to either creating a support to try and push up or closing under 2 trends and pushing down. So also just as part of a sort of a topping formation, quite often what you'll see when price is going to have a rejection or a top is you'll see it form some kind of range trend, and that usually comes about by 1 up, 2 down, 1 up. So you might even get one more positive day, but it's how that day actually closes and what trend gets created therefore off of this other candle that was a few days ago. So however that trend would get created in there, and then a rejection off that trend to create the top of the overall range. So yeah, it's not totally out of the woods. Even if it closed down, pumped up, closed them with a wick, created a trend, one more day up, and then dump is entirely possible. So we've got levels down here to be retested. So we've definitely hard closed these 112 levels, and we've got a bit of structure that's pointing down to those 112 levels. Okay, so on to some of the bigger stuff. 1 week. So 1 week is just floating in the middle. We've got quite a few trends coming through here. 115s, 114s. We're overextended from this downtrend, which is not shifting today. So that brings more like the 111, 112 area back into play. And we're re-hard closing this 110 range. So anything's possible, really. We could actually even come back down there. And because we haven't actually broken the interior downtrend, there's also nothing saying we can't come back down to try and go back under that interior downtrend, because the bungee cord rule applies. So that really BTC is showing that it's trying to push through a whole bunch of resistance, but it's not really showing anything on this time scale yet to say it is successfully pushing through that resistance. So the next candle could open, push up, hit the trend around that 116 area or higher, and then pull back again. That's pretty much all that's actually telling us. And if it does get through that trend and close over the top by the end of the day, so that would sort of mean a weekly close above 116,700, then maybe it'll bounce off the support and do a sweep up into those 120s. But that doesn't look likely at this stage because of things like this. So the 2-week move was basically from this range trend down here at about 107, and it's gone back up to the range trend here at 116. We've pushed into the 2-week hold level, which is that 114 level. So it looks like we're not going to close above that trend, unless we do get above that 116,800 sort of area, in which case we're going to open the next candle. We could potentially just reject off the backside of that trend and then come back down to these 111, 112 sort of areas to line up with the support trend that's coming through here. If we were to do a dive of that, then our next support is down here at 108, and if we were to retest the next one down, it's back to 107, and so on and so forth. And the hold level for this whole range is sitting at 105,700. So yeah, rejecting off the backside of the trend could mean we come all the way down to that 105,700 area if we don't find support on one of these uptrends that exists between them. So then the 3-week. So the 3-week looks like it's going to create another hold level here at 114,151. So that's positive, but it is also creating that topping formation. So which we mentioned before, where we're going to get some kind of range trend across like this. So it doesn't make this a very bullish pattern unless it really closes above that 116,400, 116. So it's all about really that closing above that 116 area. If we get above 116, 400, 500, 800, that sort of number, most of these time frames are actually going to have more bullish potential. But if we close under that, then we could just reject off the backside of the new range trends. And particularly if we close under anything under about 115, 400, 500 isn't exactly positive. So again, we have hold levels for this down at about 105. We also have an untested break level that gets hard closed by this candle today. So a retest of the break level would mean a dip to 106,421, and that'd just be really normal. More break levels get retested than not, so it's a pretty high probability destination for price to go, and it could be in the form of some kind of sweep or liquidity grab, some news, something that we might see come out this week, particularly with so much macroeconomic stuff. So yeah, this is so this 114,151 level, I wouldn't necessarily recommend you just take a risky long on that, because it's a front side hold level, and front side hold levels contain the highest risk. If you are going to take a long on it, just be really conscious of both of these trends, and you're probably only going to want to be longing it back into that sort of 115, the low 11500 area, just to 115,000 area, just to be very, very safe that you don't run into those trends and lose the long. Okay, 4-week, because of stuff like this. So 4-week is opening on the wrong side of its support trend, and it's not going to move the support trend. So this is one of those ones where it can open, go up, hit the 117 area, and dump. And the areas that this could dump to would be a retest of the 102 range, which so 102.428, which has been hard closed by this doji, even though we need to not necessarily entirely respect dojis. And yeah, I guess worst case scenario, it's a 94, 95 target for the front side, particularly if it loses the support trend. Also, just another move that's in play is potentially just a retest of this closed trend about 106, which has a lot of confluence with other timeframes, and then you could push all the way up to 126. So it's, yeah, timeframes like this, there's a lot of reasons to start laddering in if we do start to see 108s, 106s, 102s. If you're just looking at a big swing position, any of those numbers are pretty fair places to start laddering in, and maybe with a bottom side target of about 94, 95 for it to hit that, and then a top side you'd start laddering out probably about 126. So, okay, 6-week. So 6-week has pulled back under trend, and you can sort of see when you look at a scale, you zoom out as far as this, you can see what's been going on and why we've just been stuck in this range. We're just sitting in between support and resistance trends, and because they're such really high time frame, you can dive below them and come back up as long as you're sort of in the right place for closing, which we now are. So it's going to open on the support trend. That just gives it the ability to dive down and go up again. It is going to be under the resistance trend, so that's not exactly bullish. So this has a front side hold. So this candle that's done this move is based on this backside here of 109, but there's an untouched front side hold at 104. So that could be a destination if it hits this down to 104. It's also a hard close of the range trend, which currently sits about 101. And then you've got another really big hold level support here at 96. So some of these bigger timeframes are showing pretty decent pullbacks. Could happen soon. And then the 9-week. So as you can see, the 9-week is pulling back in underneath trend again. So unless it goes up above, to be clear, it really has to be about 118. So unless it goes back up above 118, it's probably going to open on the underside of trend again, and then that's going to give it the ability to push down. It'll actually be opening on the support trend as well, so again, more reason to push down. This has support sitting there in the form of a backside retest of the lower trend here, which is about 100k. So I don't think I've got any issues in saying that this is not the top, but I've got a lot of issues in saying that this is just going to explode from here, because some of these high time frame things are just showing that we are going to have some kind of big rejection. So I think just be very careful with the macro news, etc., and see how that goes. Okay, because then you get ones like this. So we're going to close above, but not hard close the 12-week. So yeah, we could come back down. Really, we're just going to be opening all over the show on trends and things like that. So this could come back down, and it could go as low as sort of that 100k or sub 100k range, do a big dive, and then head back up. And the next trend for this thing to retest is up around 180. So 150. Well, there's a lot of confluence around 130s, 150s, 180s if we do get a push on BTC. And then if we go one step bigger, we're really just looking to open just on the wrong side of the trend with the 18-week, and the rejection of the 18-week would sort of be about 117 area, and the support would be down around that 93, 95 sort of range. So this is the biggest time frame close we have today. So you've always got to give priority to the high time frame stuff because it takes the longest to play out, like that move, that we'll go through with SOL. But it does generally always play out, and all the other stuff in between it is just going to be some kind of blip. So that's what we're looking at there. All right, so SOL is rejecting off the daily trend. It's pushed back below the break level. If it closes down here, it creates some kind of hold level off the doji. I wouldn't be too keen on doing anything with that doji hold level, but the fact that it's a doji that broke the break level and now we're going down below the break level, much the same as what we just said with BTC, this is sort of showing that we're starting some kind of rejection. It will create a new trend today, so this is going to be a very steep uptrend, as you can see, and it's going to open on the wrong side if it closes like this. So we need, if we want another accumulation candle, and to be brutally honest, we really don't. Like we've just gone up too much. It's the more we just keep going up like this, the bigger the crash is going to be. So if we can stay under that 242.248 price point and open on the wrong side of this trend, that'll be really cool. And then we can have a bit of a retrace, and we can look at 230s, 228s. There's all sorts of numbers. We could retest any of the break levels that are down here around 219, 217. And we do have really massive time frame support appearing around 214 today. So really we actually want this to go down. We don't want this to keep going up unhealthy like this, just to have some huge crash later. Okay, so weekly, it's pulling down towards trend. It could bounce off the top of this trend and try to go up, or it could close under this trend. So if it does come all the way down to sort of that 236 area in the next hour and 42 minutes, then yeah, okay, we could go back down. But I think the only real important thing on the weekly is that we stay above this 224 trend, because this 224 trend is the origin trend for the bull market. So everything you see here that's been going on since March is just one ginormous deviation of the origin trend, which is the very first trend that was broken, which created the bull market, and it was the trend that was retested that led to the 296 and so on, and it was the one that was broken and recovered the Trump pump. It's kind of the most important trend that actually exists on the chart from a weekly perspective. So if we can close above that and come down and find support on that, then that is that's what we want basically. So the 2-week, it's rejecting off a it's a fractal origin level. I put it on the chart because, again, didn't trust this doji. It appears that that was a good thing not to trust. It lined up with our 247 targets, which we had on the really high time frames, and we've not broken through the 2-week trend. So we could see a retracement back down to that trend. But yeah, once we start getting back down to these numbers, it's around that anything really from that 228 lower is starting to get healthy, and you can start to find some good support, and we can start to find some longs for that next stage. Kind of just want to get to the very end and show you the highest time frame one because it's pretty exciting. So 3-week is going to be a hard close of the downtrend. That's cool. So with the hard close of that downtrend, we're going to be able to move resistance to the top side. The reason I kind of say that's cool is it gives us something to sweep and something to reject off if we do have any further pushes up. But we're still above the lower trends, which this is our 3-week range trend that's running through here. And it's really old. It goes all the way back to 2021. And if we were to go back and hit that, as an opposing side to this trend rejection at the 248 area, it's about 214. And the reason, we'll get to the reason why I think that's actually quite important when we get to the 18 week. But overextended on the 4 week. We do have a resistance level on the 4 week at 253, which then could create a rejection back to trend. If it went all the way to trend, it would be a rejection back to that 200. If we retested that hard close level, it'd be about 188. So these are all levels just to pay attention to if we start to dump. We've still got a range trend move in play on the 6 week, which does give us an over 300 target. So this is one of the reasons why I don't think the top is actually in. And we're also pulling back off the break level on the 9 week, and we've pushed through the trend, which the range trend, which is sitting potentially could be used as support at about that 228 area. So starting to see this 228 number popping up a lot. We've got a resistance trend sitting up at 265, and unfortunately we're pulling back to the underside of the 12-week uptrend, which is a bit of a pain. It would have been nice to close just above that, but at the end of the day we still haven't. Doesn't mean we've lost it, just means you might need another candle or two to go up. And this is the one that's quite exciting. Okay, so like we had 101-ish, there was a whole bunch of time frames like 101, 102 day, etc., that were all pointing at 247 as sort of that next high time frame target for SOL. So what we get today is we get a 18-week support level forming at 213.2, and so this gives us an actual higher target than any of the current resistances or targets in play, considering they're all out now, of 286. So we're also closing above. So although we might be closing below the 12-week, we're closing above the 18-week support trend. So yeah, this definitely says, so what this is basically telling us is that laddering into any kind of longs heading down from where we are now, probably those key areas would be things like this trend, which is almost certainly going to have confluence with those 230, that 228 area. And then you've got the hold level here at 213.273. And then there'll be a whole bunch of refined areas you can find inside that range, which will all just be other hold levels as we go down. And then you've got things like a break level there at 170, 176. And you've got a range trend retest down around the same area. So yeah, the next dip actually now has some pretty high time frame support to take us up to a higher level. So that's overall positive for long positions. But once we start to get below these levels, you're going to want to become very careful on your shorts again, because if you've been wrecked trying to short stuff recently on lower time frames, because we had this in play. So just fractally look at this. We had 189.270. We had a target of 247.3. We had a range, or it might even that was just standard trend actually. We had a standard trend and a support trend, both down here in the 170s to 160 area. Once we got the support, we traveled through to that topside target. So the weakness that we're currently seeing in the last sort of 12 hours on SOL, that weakness is because we've hit these targets now, and there isn't really a lot of incentive to continue up other than trend trading, because you can trade trend to trend and that kind of stuff. But as horizontal levels are generally the most accurate and the strongest levels that you'll get on charts. We've done the minimum moves. We can go further, but now that we've run into some resistances, it's more likely we'll pull back. And things like the lower time frames here, you can see is starting to get weak. So whereas before we would have just pushed through a 4-hour level like it was nothing, just like heat up a knife and just chop a block of butter in half, is basically what we were seeing as we just keep pushing up. Now that the high time frame obligations have been met, you can see more weakness. So this 4-hour close that will happen at the same time as the daily close, if it closes at this sort of price level, you might get a bounce off this whole level here at around 239. but realistically, we're closing under these trends, and we can start therefore moving back to these deeper trends. And so that would sort of imply your 226, your 219, your 205 levels. And these are all levels that we've just identified have confluence on higher time frames, but here they all are just on the basic 4-hour structure as well. So, there's always more noise on the 4-hour chart because candles form, trends move, you get little bounces, and then on it goes, and it keeps moving. But yeah, there's a lot of things looking like we're going to get a pullback. And considering we've now got rejection on SOL BTC, and we've got rejection potential on total market cap, and we've run out of upside horizontal minimum obligation targets with SOL, yeah, I'd be more inclined to say that now, or certainly this week coming, is probably now the right week for a pullback if we're going to have a pullback. And then we'll get some amazing financial news or whatever the thing is, and then they'll just, it'll happen to, probably happen to correspond with one of those horizontal or diagonal support levels getting hit, and then the price will go up again, and, everyone will say it was the news or whatever, but it's just, yeah, it's all on the charts. Cool. That is pretty much us. Still just keeping an eye on SOE. Just wait to see how that closes the month. If it closes the month above trend or above the hold, then just might relong it again and just take it up to the break level. But for now, not terribly worried about reopening that long. Have taken the profits. That's all good. ENA keeps bouncing off the hold levels just to taunt us, but still just going to wait on ENA, see if it actually pulls back a bit more, maybe rejects the trend again and comes down to find some deeper support, and then yes, long it. The thing with ENA is that it's already tested its hold levels on the high time frame, so the next target, once it finds decent support, is over $1. So it's worth keeping an eye on. It could just be a good trade to take, just not yet. World Liberty Finance is pulling back down under trend, but it's still back up inside the range, so it'll probably move between the trend and the upper trend, or between the break of this older range. Once it gets back inside, back up to the trend again. It's now tested the break level there at 0.23. So this is all part of reversal patterns. It's tested a break level. It needs to make it into an origin level. It gets over the origin level, and then it can bounce. So the perfect day for that to happen would be at least one more day of down, and then an up to get over, which would be like a Tuesday the 16th, and then a retest of trend and break maybe on the 17th, and then a push up to that 2683 area. So just keep an eye on this for the next couple of days. If you want to take a trade on it, just wait for it to recover that 2332 level, and then push up into this into 2683 or 2896, and then once it breaks those, nothing stops it traveling up to this trend again, up around the 30 to 40 cent sort of area. So yeah, it's just going through that phase. So this is they went through the first phase, everyone chased it, they've dumped into those people's liquidations and capitulation, and now they're accumulating, and then it'll have a markup phase. So it's just coming. ZEUS is not doing much. I say this is probably the least. It is going to create a hold level, so it's going through the right processes, but it still hasn't tested the hold level here or the break level here, and this is the least one I'd trust as far as trading, because it's already had it's already had a markup phase, and it's already gone through distribution, and it hasn't really taken off very rapidly yet, but if they're greedy enough, they'll push this back up to trend. But I think the ENA is way more likely to go up than what this is. Cook's doing basically nothing, and Hype's not too bad. It's pulling back towards trend, but I don't think that's going to get under that trend today. So therefore, you could get a bounce off the top side of that trend and a move up into price discovery, or you could get a dive of that trend to retest any of the levels in here. The only problem is that none of them are actually hard close levels, so there's still a lot of risk in this. The safest place to actually enter a trade on this would be on this weekly trend coming up here, which would be about 46 cents and have a lot of confluence with the hold level. That'd be the safest place to get in it, because this is not a hard closed level. There's not really much inside that, and it may just bounce off the backside of this trend and then have another move up. So yeah, maybe you miss out on a decent move. It's just really hard to tell with this as to whether it's just trying to entice people to long at this level and then dump, because this is what you see, before things really go into big downside moves, is they'll go up above a key level, everyone gets bullish, everyone longs, and then they just go down and just dive, because realistically nothing's hard closed, so there's no reason that it can't just dump all the way down. So yeah, just keep an eye on it. It will have a break level here at 42.52, so that would be your invalidation, or your first invalidation. If you went on lower leverage with a wider stop, then at 36.92 area would be a safer place to have a stop loss, just below, just because it may still come down and tag this break level and then continue up, but if it broke that hold level there. So yeah, stop losses at 42.52 or 36.92 if you want to take a long-term trade on this, and you'd probably look to allocate your position between the top side of the trend and the 49.88 level here. It all really depends on how much more time it spends up here, because if it does spend another week up here and it's an accumulation, then that becomes support, and then you can enter off that support and go for it, still keeping your stop losses in the same places. But if you did get the trade off the top of this trend after another week, then you could have your stop loss under that 42.52 area with a little bit more certainty that it's pretty safe, because you'd have multiple things to protect it. So you'd have that topside trend, you'd have the uptrend, you'd have the hold level. So you're diving through all of that to get to that is not so likely. So yeah, cool. All right, well, hopefully that helped. Like and subscribe. I did get a comment about how to make these things faster, and I will think about that. I could probably make them faster by just not covering off every time frame, and maybe just spoon feeding you the levels, but they are sort of designed so that you can actually learn and then hopefully be able to just do all this by yourself, and then yeah, so, but I will think about if there is a way to do it. I'm still working on how to get the chart shared. I've been tidying up all of my and actually naming properly and saving properly all of my layouts, etc., which is all about getting them to a point where maybe we can actually start to share the links via TradingView, and then you can just, if you're not able to catch up on these things or tune in all the time, maybe you can just bring up the links. And likewise, join the Discord. We've got ops feeds in there where it actually just feeds a lot of the closing information and range trades. It just feeds them in, so you'd know which time frames to look at, you'd know where the potential ranges are, and then you just need to sort of understand the basics of leverage and sizing and risk management, and then you could start to take some of those trades. And there's plenty of people in the Discord who are actually taking these trades on a daily basis. So and for the most part they seem to be winning because they haven't gone away. So yeah, we'll catch you again soon. Cheers, bye.